Hey everybody, it's Julianne from Cary Quilting Company in Cary, North Carolina. Today is Tuesday, December 26th. I hope you guys all had a nice holiday weekend plus one. And if you're like me, you're a little bit glad that Christmas is over. But we have a lot of good things to look forward to in January. Starting with, just to let you know, this coming Sunday, the 31st of December, we will be open 1 to 3, which is a Sunday. We're normally open 1 to 5. We will be open 1 to 3 this Sunday. And then on Monday, the 1st of January, we will be closed. But also in January, we're going to be vending at the Quilting and Fiber Arts Marketplace in Sanford over the second weekend. I think it's the 12th, 13th. And then our 11th year anniversary of the shop happens at the end of January. So you definitely want to stick around to see what all is new and all of the exciting things that are coming your way in 2024. Now, like I mentioned last week, this week and next Tuesday is all about answering your quilt questions. So a week or two ago, I asked people to submit questions online, and for the questions I answer, these people will be getting little prizes from the shop. And so I've batched the questions into sort of categories, and today's category is all about quilt judging. Now, I want to preface this whole set of questions and answers over the next week with these things are my opinions. These things are not, the quilt god's opinions. So whatever I'm going to tell you is just my opinions and my thoughts and my experiences. So definitely don't take it as the only source. And of course, the internet is full of ideas and opinions. So if you'd like more, you can search up more. The first question we have today is from Barbara Waldron. She says, how does a person know if their quilt is good enough to be entered into a quilt show? My hair is doing something weird today. So the first thing I want to say is quilting is a hobby. Quilting is fun. If you don't want your fun to be competitive, you don't have to do it. Competitive judged shows are not for everybody, and they don't have to be for everybody. I happen to love competition, and so earning ribbons is one of the ways that I say, yay me, but it's not for everybody. And there are also shows that are unjudged shows. I was just vending at a show in Greenville, North Carolina earlier this year, which was an unjudged show. So people were putting up their quilts just for other people's enjoyment, which is a very non-threatening and nice and easy way to get into showing your works to other people at quilt shows if you haven't done it before. Now, let me look at my notes over here because I wrote a lot of notes about what I wanted to share. So I have been quilt judging for about 4 or 5 years now. I am not a certified judge. The National Association of Certified Quilt Judges is the only national judging certification organization that I know of anyway. And there are only 54 certified quilt judges in the whole United States. So the process for quilt judging is very, very long. It takes about 5 years of experience and then a huge test and a huge paper. So this is the book I got when I took the quilt judging introduction course. It is gigantic. There are all kinds of the job, the shows, the categories, the systems, evaluating design, professional paperwork. So once you've done all of the kind of prerequisites, which include following other judges and scribing for other judges, your paperwork at the end is between 50 and 100 pages, and it answers 31 very complex questions about where is a French seam appropriate in quilted clothing, or what is the appropriate interior of a bag? How should the seams look on the interior of a quilted bag? So not just flat quilts, but anything that could be entered into a quilt show, you're expected to know everything about. The other thing I want to point out about judging is that when quilts are judged at shows, judges have 3 to 5 minutes tops per quilt. When a friend and I judged the state fair earlier this year, we got through 400 quilts in 6 hours. So no one is going to be looking at your quilt with a fine tooth comb at every single stitching and every single edge, because there's just not time. And a lot of guilds or organizations don't have the budget to pay judges for the amount of time it would take to really evaluate every quilt. So if you put a quilt into a show and you get a feedback form and you have 3 little sentences on there that say, good binding, needs work, blah, 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 just know that those people didn't spend an hour looking at your quilt. So even though their comments are definitely valid, it is not going to be the only things that they saw. And also the people who scribe, the people who write the comments, sometimes are working hard to keep up with what the judges are saying. Let me see what else I want to tell you about. So one thing you want to consider when you're entering a show is the size of the show. Obviously, you would start with a local show, but then there's also regional and national shows. And I've had quilts in all, including actually an international show. With international, you want to make sure that your centimeters to inches is correct, because I was actually disqualified from judging for a show I sent a quilt to because my metric to imperial conversions were not exactly right. And my quilt was this much too small to enter the category I had sent it for. And you want to look at the categories in the shows, because sometimes you can enter a category that's going to have 50 or 60 quilts, but you may choose a category that may have less quilts, giving you an option to do better because you have less competition. You also want to check your rules for your show, because sometimes shows have rules about how recently things must have been completed. Sometimes they don't, but oftentimes it's going to be a year or two. So you want to make sure that the quilt you're intending to enter has been finished within the right time period. And some shows are free to enter and some shows have fees associated, so you want to take that into account as well. And if you're sending a quilt away, especially to a regional, national, or international show, you'll also need an appraisal. And when you mail things off, you've got to do the insurance. So it's really something to think about, all the financial pieces involved if you're intending to send things off to shows. Now, things that judges look for. Number one is overall design, fabric, and choices. Obviously, it's got to be a pleasing quilt. Number two is pointy points and seams that match. We're looking for the details involved in precise piecing. Quilting that has a consistent density. Now, what this means is you don't want really tight quilting on this part of the quilt and then kind of phone it in quilting on the rest. For every quilt that goes in, now this one is long arms, so that's not a great example, but for every quilt that goes in, we want the density to be equivalent throughout the quilt, the quilting density. And then a big one, big one, and I can't tell you how many times we mentioned this when we were looking at the state fair quilts, is binding. Good binding can make or break a quilt. Now this quilt is an example of good binding, which is why I brought it. It's a 1/4 inch. It's significantly the same all the way along. It is hand stitched on the back. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. There's teeny little invisible hand stitching on the back, so not a double stitch binding, but machine stitch to the front and then folded to the back for a hand stitch. And then I have this 1/4 pinned because judges also want to see that this fold has been stitched down. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can. This fold right here has little individual stitches in it. And the edges of your quilt as well. So I brought 2 others to show you over here. This is actually the same quilt block. One of these finished wavy and one of them finished flat. So if you look at the edges of this, I can't make this quilt lay flat. See, there's just fullness. So if I push down this one, I get a bump here. If I push down this one, I get a bump here. It is not a flat quilt. This is a flat quilt, more so. And so that's another thing that judges look for. Again, this is a good binding. This is a binding that has double stitching on it. So if I was judging these two, this one would get first, regardless of the colors, but because of the quality. And then, yeah, no ripples. That's what I had listed there. So to become a quilt judge, first you take the judging introduction class. Then you find lots and lots and lots of opportunities to judge. You shadow nationally associated judges. You do a lot of work with other judges. You find bigger shows to judge for, and then you do all your paperwork and your application and you're sitting with the panel, and it's a big 5-year process, but it can be very rewarding. And if you like to travel, you can get your travel paid for that way. I'm going to link to a few things in today's video just so that you have them. I'm going to link to the NACQG that website. I'm going to link to my binding tutorial, and I'm going to link to a hanging sleeve tutorial because hanging sleeves are usually required for quilt shows. So if you're going to put a quilt into a show, you normally have to put a little sleeve here so they can slide a dowel through it to hang it. And so I have a great tutorial on that as well. The other person who asked a question today was Sandy Smithmeyer, and we covered her answers as well. How do you become a quilt judge, and an A to Z list of what steps you need. So you can find all that right here on this website. It's very, very complete. Tomorrow we'll be talking about more questions and answers. I hope you found this useful. And again, if you'd like to hit those tutorials, I'm going to be linking them in the description of today's video. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you back here from the shop tomorrow. Bye.